Hello beauties, I hope you're doing amazing. Shaz here, and I'm excited to tell you all about 10 things that would make me not purchase a makeup palette. If that sounds good to you, as always, give this video a thumbs up. Also consider subscribing if you're not subscribed yet. Let's go into the video. Beauties, there is no order in this list. Let's get started. Number one, the price of the palette. The price of everything these days, with inflation going up and interest rates going up, is skyrocketing. Obviously, it's also the same case with makeup. Back in the day, Natasha Denona started releasing palettes that they were selling for $120 something, and I used to be like, oh my goodness, who's gonna buy this? Nowadays, I'm starting to see palettes for upwards of $200 something. I don't know what's going on out there, beauties, but I can tell you all that I don't have that kind of money right now. Hopefully one day I'll be rich enough to buy that, but right now $200 something is just way too much for me. If a palette is more than $50, I need very, very, very good reason for justifying the price tag. And $200 is 4 times that much. So it needs to give me 4 times the reason to want to pick that palette up. Number 2, packaging. Brands back in the day used to try to get super creative, and I give them creativity points, but would come out with packaging that was just so bulky and large and difficult to fit in places. As I'm saying this, I'm like, some brands still do that today. Do you know which brands I'm talking about? Yes, I have definitely talked myself very easily out of purchases because the package was bulky. Another thing about packaging is irregular shape. I and a lot of people who are going to be buying makeup, particularly if we're talking about indie brands, we are probably the type of people who buy more than just one palette a year. So we need a nice way to be able to store them. If a package is not easy to store because they're just very oddly shaped, I don't have the patience for it. I'm probably just going to opt out. And while we're talking about the packaging, let's also talk about the heaviness and the weight of the packaging. Again, people like me have a lot of makeup, and when I'm looking for something, I don't have time, don't have energy, do not have the physical capacity to move heavy stuff from one side of my apartment to the other to find the thing that I'm looking for. The smaller, the more compact, the more lightweight something is, the more I'm interested in picking it up. Let me also mention, sustainability matters a lot to me. I do not like to buy plastic packaging. So a lot of times I decide not to buy from a brand because the packaging is made of plastic. Plastic is not good for the environment. We all know that at this point. I hope we all know that at this point. On top of that, plastic is harder to store. It's more likely to break or be damaged in moving around, and it's more likely to be heavy. Number 3, which is almost an extension to the packaging, is gigantic palettes with too many pans, potentially too many dupes. If a palette has more than 16 pans, I've realized 16 pans is now my limit. It really needs to convince me why it needs to have those additional pans. If I start to spot a lot of dupes in a palette, that palette is dead to me. I'm not going to buy it. Number 4, palettes that are dupes of another palette from the same brand. And beauties, as I'm saying that, I think you all know which brand I'm talking about, but we all know of at least one brand that just loves duping itself. They have a palette, or they had a palette that probably did well, and now they're trying to resurrect the success of that palette by reinventing that palette in multiple ways. And it's like, no, let that glory survive as a legacy and just move on and do new things. Why are you doing this? And a lot of times with this, I also feel like the brand is not really trying to make an effort. You know, they're like, oh, that palette was successful. Let's just, redo that palette, move a few colors around, add a few neutrals or colors here and there, and redo this. And maybe those new palettes become popular, but not for me. I'm not going to buy a palette that keeps getting resurrected in new forms and shapes. Number 5 is about color stories. There are some color stories that I'm much less prone to buying. If palettes are magnetic, I might think twice. But if palettes are not, if a palette, for example, is a rainbow palette. Rainbow has been done before. We all have 1, 2, 3, if not more, rainbow palettes in our collection. We probably don't need more. We probably have a dupe of that palette somewhere. So unless I'm buying to review it or I'm buying for some other reason, I'm very unlikely to pick up a rainbow palette. The second color story that I'm probably not going to pick up unless the brand gives me good reasons for wanting to, like having a very super shifty multi-chrome type of shades, or having magnetic palettes, is a monochrome palette. Monochrome palettes are very 2019 and it is going to be 2024 soon. So I don't want to go back in time to 5 years ago. I have a lot of monochrome palettes from back in the day. If you're doing monochrome palettes, you might want to make sure it's magnetic. Reason number 6. Distasteful and potentially vulgar names and shapes and images on a palette. I think you all are thinking about at least one palette we can think of who falls into this category. There are other non-palette items that some brands have released that also falls into this kind of category. You know, if the shade names are not PG-13, I don't find a reason to buy it. I think makeup brings out the creative child in me, and with that kind of personality does not go vulgar names and not PG-13 stuff. Also, a lot of children like to play with makeup. That's another thing I like to stay aware of. So it's just not my thing to want to buy or want to own things that are not kid friendly. I also find them kind of a very distasteful marketing gimmick. I feel like brands aren't doing it because they actually have a perspective, but they just want to use the shock value to sell more. And to me, that's cheap marketing strategy. Number 7 is having a past bad brand experience. If I purchased from a brand before and for some reason I either had serious quality issues, serious customer service problem, the package was extremely delayed or just never got to me or got to me super damaged and the brand didn't do anything about it, those all are bad brand experience, and they would definitely make me think twice about wanting to buy again from that brand. Now, there is a small threshold for new brands. You know, if a brand is absolutely brand new, this is their first launch, I give them the benefit of the doubt. I let them do a little bit of experimentation. I'll have them have a little bit of leeway because the brand owner is probably learning. We operate in a very small space, but there's no reason to be rude to people or not respond to people's customer service emails or inquiries if they've had issues with a brand, for example. Reason number 8, beauties. We are almost in 2024 and I don't want to see any more unsafe products in a palette. By that I mean I don't want to see any more plastic-based glitters in eyeshadow palettes. There is no reason for having plastic-based glitters in eyeshadow palettes. We've been talking about it for the past 5 years. I don't really know how many people actually use or need glitters in eyeshadow palettes. I wish some brand would do some market research in the past 5 years about this, because pretty much any channel I watch tells me they don't want to see this product in a palette. So even if I use glitter on my face with my own knowledge, knowing this is unsafe, maybe I have a 12-year-old niece who comes to my house and just plays around in my makeup and ends up using something that they shouldn't be using on their eyes without my knowledge. On top of that, when I'm considering whether a palette is worth the price, I divide the price of the palette by the pans that are in it. And I'm not going to consider the glitter pans because I don't use the glitter pans. For a lot of palettes, it's going to make the palette not worth the price if it has 1 or 2 glitters in it. Let's remove anything that's not eye safe from an eyeshadow palette. Number 9 is pre-orders. This didn't used to be the trend back in the day. You know, you would get pre-orders with some brands. It happened very rarely. But nowadays, pretty much every single brand is having pre-orders, and I'm over it. I don't want to order things in pre-order. I'm a little bit at a loss trying to understand why brands can't potentially foresee how many people are going to buy from them on day 1, 2, or 3. Why is it the brands sell out the first day? I'm almost becoming opposed to buying things at launch, because what has happened to me in the past is that I bought things in pre-orders. I did not receive them for 3 or 4 months. The brand on the same item ended up having sales between when I pre-ordered and when I received my item. I'm not doing that. I'm also planning on not buying things when they launch, because I'm just over this. I'm over giving my hard-earned money to buy expensive things and not having them in a reasonable time after I buy them. If you're seeing this and you completely disagree with me, I like to read your comments in the comments below. Beauties, number 10 should not come to any of you as a surprise. I pretty much can't shut up about this. And that is palettes that do not have magnetic capability. By magnetic capability, I'm talking about the pans in a palette coming out with one of these magnetic tools. So that if I want to rearrange the pans, if I want to maybe declutter the palette, but I want to keep some of the pans, or if I want to use some of the pans in a custom-made palette separately, I have the capability to do that. So as we go into 2024, I'm going to use these 10 gauges to decide whether I want to buy a palette or not. Thank you so much, beauties, for being here with me. Tell me if there's anything that makes you not want to buy a palette that I didn't talk about in the comments below. Also, if you're not subscribed yet and you like these kinds of videos, don't forget to subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. I love you all. Have an amazing day, and until next time. Bye.